Hey everyone, this is Miss Valentine, and you are watching the Energy Efficiency Notes for AP Environmental Science. Now, in current energy policy, we're definitely moving towards more renewable sources of energy. That's one piece of the puzzle of lowering our energy usage. Energy efficiency is another way that we are moving to improve our energy use and reduce the amount of emissions that we put into the atmosphere. So there's a lot of different ways that you can make your home, businesses, and other things more energy efficient. Improvements in energy efficiency could save at least one third of the energy used in the world. That's a lot of energy. And up to 43% of the energy used in the US could be reduced by energy efficiency. We have a lot of different technologies to increase energy efficiency. It's just a matter of putting the money into increasing those efficiencies. So we can increase industrial operational efficiency. We can increase the efficiency of motor vehicles. There's a huge move for that currently. And then appliances, if you see Energy Star appliances, those are generally focused on more efficient operation. And then the efficiency of buildings. And that is an area where we have a lot of room for improvement and where there is a lot of money being offered, especially government programs, to help people make their homes more energy efficient or their businesses more energy efficient. There's all sorts of different efforts that go into energy efficiency because of the potential that it could have in reducing our energy usage. Part of the reason why you are getting an energy efficiency kit from me this week is because those things are provided by the energy companies in order to reduce our energy. Now, why would they go spend that money giving you all of these supplies? Well, they actually have government incentives, or the government gives them money, whether it's tax breaks or it might just be a lump sum of money. I'm not actually sure which, but those companies are benefiting because the government is giving them money to reduce energy use throughout Ohio. Let me just make sure I didn't skip one. There we go. Energy efficiency is just how much useful work you get from each unit of energy. So if you remember learning about the second law of thermodynamics, energy does get wasted when it's transferred from one form to another. So when it's transferred from electrical into mechanical, say, for moving your car or for spinning a fan blade or whatever you use it for, some of that energy is lost as heat. So the more useful energy or useful work that you get out of the electricity that you use, the more efficient it is. There are some advantages of reducing this energy waste. It's the cheapest way to provide more energy at a lower cost. It reduces pollution and degradation, so you're not putting as much carbon emissions into the atmosphere, especially if you use fossil fuels as your main source of fuel. It slows global warming, again, because you're not putting as much carbon dioxide into the atmosphere or methane. Methane is a byproduct of oil production, so you're reducing that greenhouse gas emission as well. And then it increases economic and national security. Interestingly enough, the Biden administration has included a climate change representative on our national security team for the first time ever. And that's because climate change and global warming is now becoming more of a national security threat because of the destabilization of people when we have these big natural disasters related to climate change. And then also you have to consider the economic impact of transitioning from fossil fuels to renewable energies. Those who are dependent on a fossil fuel economy have to find new jobs, new ways of making income. So all of those things do tie into our national security, even if they are environmental issues. Here is a diagram you have in your notes that shows how much of the US system is reliant on fossil fuel energy. So right now, or as of when this textbook was created, I think this was 2014 or 15, 85% of our energy inputs are non-renewable fossil fuels. Only 8% was nuclear, and a very small portion, 3%, is renewable. Now we're hoping to increase this number, this green bar here, over the next several decades. In fact, there's some areas that they're looking to completely transform us from a fossil fuel industry into into a renewable energy industry. So, like transportation, for example. And then our outputs are very small in terms of the the useful energy that we actually get out of all this energy input. Petrochemicals, this would be like what you use to make plastics and other chemicals. Um, this is the energy loss. So again, energy efficiency is the goal is to decrease the amount of energy lost in this red space here. And then again, energy waste is another, I'm sorry, so unavoidable energy loss cannot be avoided, obviously. And this is the area, this purple square here is where you would want to try and shrink it so you're not wasting as much energy. So if you can find ways to improve the efficiency of a system, it will decrease the amount of energy wasted. So improving energy efficiency could have a number of different benefits. It lowers our costs, it reduces oil imports, which is a good thing for our energy security. It reduces pollution, environmental degradation, buys us time to phase in renewable energy, and creating local jobs. I will say, though, that there is a challenge in making sure that those jobs go to places that maybe have fossil fuel reliance. If you are going to take that away from them, you do need to provide them with an alternative. And that actually is one of the goals, I believe, in the current climate plan that we have, is to try and retrain people to do more green jobs. So there is a huge amount of resources and effort that has to go into moving us from a fossil fuel based economy to a more renewable energy based economy. Here we are at our first pit stop. What are two examples of unnecessary energy waste? So think of ways that you see energy wasted around your home, in school, or out in the world somewhere. So just think of a couple of things. And then which of the two benefits listed in the table, in this table here, do you think are the most important and why? Pause the video while you answer these two questions. All right, so how can we improve energy efficiency in industry and in our utilities? So these are areas outside of our home. There is a movement towards something called cogeneration, where you take um, one type of energy and you use the waste heat from that process to generate power. So you have two forms of energy from the same fuel source. Again, a lot of uh, processes release waste heat, and that heat could be used to create electricity. So essentially, we learned in the last chapter, chapter 15, that creating the heat to produce steam, to turn a turbine, those are all things that are used to create electricity. Well, if you have an industrial furnace that's being used in manufacturing, for example, there's a lot of waste heat that's given off, and that waste heat could be used to simultaneously create electricity in addition to manufacturing products. So that's what cogeneration is using the waste heat to create electricity, create energy. And then you have replacing certain energy wasting electric motors, just changing out things that are less efficient for things that are more efficient. So we don't want that waste heat to continue to be wasted. So that's essentially the idea behind cogeneration and trying to create more efficiently operating industrial equipment. We can also recycle materials. If you remember from chapter 14, when we talked about mining and materials, there is a lot that goes into the process of mining, and a lot less energy, resources, mining, materials, all of that. A lot less of it is needed when you just recycle the materials that you already have. So having an infrastructure that allows for us to recycle materials is really key in reducing waste from that. Switched from low efficiency incandescent lighting. So this is the heat bulbs, like the old light bulbs that you couldn't screw off without burning your hand, to more high efficiency fluorescent or CFL light bulbs and LED lighting. Nowadays, LED lighting is way cheaper than it used to be. And we don't even see those swirly light bulbs as much anymore, the CFL or fluorescent light bulbs, because they had mercury in them. But LED lighting is super cheap now, and it's way more efficient. You get a whole lot more electricity going towards lighting the light bulb rather than producing waste heat that's given off from old incandescent light bulbs, the traditional light bulbs that you may have seen when you were a kid. Our current electrical grid system is really outdated and wasteful. So just the way that we get energy around to our different parts of the country is very wasteful. There is a movement now to move towards a smart grid. So this is one of the investments that our current administration is interested in investing in, is to make it a smart grid, make it more energy efficient. So you have more efficient transmission lines, so less electricity is lost to waste heat. It's more digitally controlled. So you look at demand in certain regions very specifically, rather than just keeping all this energy in supply, anticipating that that energy is going to be used. So actually controlling where the electricity is going to go. Right now, there is a big room. It's actually in New Albany, and it's in a secret location where there is someone who monitors our grid to see like how much electricity is being used and sent out, and when there's outages and things like that. If we could do that all with computers and smart controls, we might be able to better handle our current energy supply and reduce the amount of waste that we send when we send too much electricity to an area that doesn't need it. Also would help us to respond to local changes in demand and supply, like I just mentioned. So instead of having someone sitting there and being like, okay, we have something down, someone could be sitting there being like, oh, this part of the city needs more power right now, this part doesn't. So being able to control that more efficiently would definitely help reduce our energy usage. And it would also help us to buy renewable energy, because you would see where renewable energy is being generated. So let's say you have a bunch of houses with solar panels on them. You can see how much energy those houses are creating and reduce the amount of, let's say, coal or oil that you are producing to try and meet power demand. So that's one of the big troubles with renewable energy, is that it is unpredictable. You don't know when the sun is going to be shining or the wind is going to be blowing. But if you could take that data in real time when it's actually being generated, you could reduce the amount of fossil fuels that you're using in order to supply electricity. Right now, they always just kind of predict based on the time of day and the weather. They try to predict how much electricity that we're going to need, and they generate that regardless of whether or not we're going to need that electricity. If we are able to have a digital system where we can send the energy and pull the energy from certain locations, whether it's renewable energy or even fossil fuels, producing less of that, we would create a system that is way more efficient, instead of just like blasting energy out and wasting anything that doesn't get used. We can also look into green architecture. There is a program, if you look down here, LEED, you might see this in a lot of new construction when there are public projects. So these LEED, or Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design buildings, they often have green roofs on them where you have soil and vegetation on the roof. I would have loved to try and get a green roof on Westerville South, but honestly, I'm too busy to maintain it at the moment. Maybe someday, we'll see. They do take some maintenance, but they do help reduce the amount of energy use, because instead of having sunlight hitting like a black tar roof, you have sunlight hitting plants, which absorb the sunlight and keep things cooler. There's also super insulation, so you can keep any heat that's generated inside the building without any of it escaping. We'll look at some pictures of heat escaping from buildings. Insulation didn't used to be a standard because energy was so cheap. My house was built in like 1966, and there's no insulation in the walls whatsoever. So in the wintertime, it gets really cold. But if we had insulation in the walls, or if they had built that, it would have helped so much right now. However, when it was built in the 60s, that wasn't even really like an issue. Energy was super cheap then. So new buildings are generally built with more insulation. There is like I said, the LEED program is a certification program. So these buildings are categorized as LEED, and it's best in class building strategies and practices for environmental design. If you ever go to Battelle Darby Creek Metro Park in hold on, let me get my directions right, southwest of Columbus, you'll see that their nature center is a LEED facility, and it's really cool to see some of the things that they have there, including the green roof. So here's a picture of a green roof. There is a movement in lots of urban settings to have these green roofs, because again, they help control the temperature within the building, because you don't have just sunlight hitting the building and heating it up. These help to regulate the temperature within the building. So there's a movement for it. But again, it does take maintenance, just as well as you think of like maintaining a garden or landscaping, you do have to maintain them. Another way that you can save money and energy in current buildings is to do an energy audit. The only reason I know that we have no insulation in our walls is because we had an energy audit. We chose to put more insulation in our cellar. Wait, no, what's that called? Attic. In our attic first, and eventually we'll get to the walls. But there's an energy audit will tell you all of those things about your home that you don't already know. So insulate and plug any leaks that allow air in. When you get an energy audit, they actually bring this huge fan in and they suck the air out of your house. And then you can go along all the seams of your windows and your fireplace, and you can actually feel where the breeze is blowing in. So they create a pressure difference in your house so you can find out where the leaks are. And try to stop other heating and cooling losses. Usually insulation is the key for that. If you heat houses more efficiently, you'll increase your efficiency. So that more has to do with the furnaces, making sure you change your filter, things like that. Purchasing energy efficient appliances. When you do need to purchase appliances, try to pick things that are more energy efficient, maybe that have the Energy Star logo. Energy efficiency lighting, so that would be more LED bulbs, and then using motion sensors to turn lights on and off. I have been dying for motion sensor lights in the science department for years. I'm hoping with the new building renovations that we will get some motion sensor lights, because people are always leaving the lights on and it drives me crazy. So that is something that that can help actually save a lot of energy. If you aren't in a room, why have the lights on? It's just wasting energy. Here is a picture of, it's called a thermogram, so an infrared photo showing the heat being lost before and after a home has been well insulated. So right now, I imagine my house looks a little bit more like this one on the left, where it's releasing tons of energy through the walls. There's no insulation in my walls. It's basically just like boards and wood and brick on the outside. So our goal is to ultimately get that insulated. But a lot of homes in the United States, if they were built before a certain time when energy was still really cheap, their insulation is going to be really poor. So getting those homes insulated is a huge step towards increasing energy efficiency in our country. All right, so here we are at this picture, and you guys have this diagram in your notes packet. So there's a lot of different strategies here for providing efficiency in the attic, bathrooms, kitchens, basements, outside. Even having plants and trees outside will help, although it doesn't always help your gutters. And then there's other places where you can improve efficiency in your home. The energy kits that you received will actually address some of these issues, but there's a lot of other things that you can do, and that's why I encourage you to research it a little bit further if you're looking to increase energy efficiency in your home. For your next pit stop, you're going to go through, I want you to read through these items here. I'll give you a few minutes to look through them. And I want you to star some things that you think might be useful in your own home, things that you could do, or if you live in an apartment, what your landlords could do to decrease the amount of energy that is used there. So star items in the diagram that your family already does, and then circle the ones that you're not sure about. So, and then part two of the pit stop is which of the actions do you think will make the biggest difference in the energy savings in your home? So what would be the most efficient way to improve energy efficiency in your home? Pause the video while you answer those questions, while you star, circle, and answer the second question there. So why are we still wasting so much energy and so much money? Energy is artificially cheap. So the government does subsidize fossil fuels, particularly, and other wasteful energy industries. So that's just politics, people wanting to provide funding to sources that are not necessarily good for us. Having tax breaks in place where energy becomes cheaper. And so again, we talked about true cost in the past, but our prices for energy don't necessarily include the true cost, including the environmental and other far-reaching social consequences that they should actually cost. There are not a lot of large and long-lasting incentives. So government rebates, low-interest loans, those things, they come and go depending on, honestly, who is in power in the government. So in the next 4 years or so, it's 2021, so in the next 3 or 4 years or so, we should have quite a lot of incentives because this administration is focused on more renewable energy and energy efficiency goals. But then that could change if it goes back to a different administration. So that can make a huge difference in how much progress we make. And then there's also a lack of education about energy efficiency. So that's one of the reasons why the OEP, Ohio Energy Project, is out there, is to try and help educate students, whether you learned about it when you were in elementary school or if you are learning about it right now in high school. It's important to know that energy efficiency is possible and that there are things out there that you can do. So that is a huge component of why we are still wasting so much energy and money, even though we have the technology to update our systems. Renewable energy is very important to our global climate change problem at the moment. But again, we still have to make some progress on this. So solar energy is one of the biggest ones, especially in the Southwest where the sun is abundant. Wind energy is another one. And then geothermal energy. There are a few different ways that geothermal energy can work, even in areas that don't have tectonic plates close by or a boundary close by where that type of activity happens. You'll be reading about that in your textbook this week. But renewable energy would be cheaper if we could get rid of these inequitable subsidies. So again, that word subsidy is just basically being paid for. So you have subsidies paying for, or government money paying for, fossil fuel related industries or inefficient power grids instead of paying for more renewable energy. And again, that can change depending on who's in power. You have inaccurate prices again on power, like I said, or artificially lowering the price of renewable energy would go a long way. Keeping non-renewable energy like fossil fuels artificially low, like we're doing in Ohio with our nuclear power plants, that is going to stand in the way of us getting to more renewable energy. So once again, it's all about where does the government direct our funding in terms of the energy sector. Are we trying to save old non-renewable systems, or are we moving towards a more renewable and sustainable future? And again, it can depend on the time period that we're in and who's in power. So here is a bar graph showing the different amounts of energy that can be created from different power or different sources of power. So our energy usage in terms of an exajoule, which is 100 million trillion joules, a lot of energy, we have 527 exajoules of energy used in 2010. If we were to have direct solar power, so those would be our solar panels, we'd have greater than 1,000. If we were able to harness all of that is available in the world, we'd have greater than 1,000 exajoules of energy available. Wind could provide all of the energy need for 2010 as well, with 600 exajoules. So you can see these sources of power have the potential to provide us with a great deal of energy. It's all about our technology and our ability to grab those sources of energy. So like in the case of solar, having solar panels, or wind, having the wind turbines. So all of those things depend on installing the technology that is available to harness those things. And once again, they're renewable. They're things that can continue to be generated. So let me just make sure I didn't have anything. There we go. So in conclusion, we have to shift gradually to smaller, more decentralized micropower systems. What that means is you might have a solar farm in your community, or you might have a wind farm in your community that provides all of the power for that community, rather than having to transmit all of this electricity across hundreds of miles from a power plant to a community. So trying to bring the renewable sources closer to where the energy is needed will go a long way to reducing the amount of energy that's wasted along the way. And then an increase in energy efficiency along with a regulated use of natural gas is the best way to transition to renewable energy. I've mentioned this before, but natural gas is the least polluting of the fossil fuels. And so, and we've also had an abundance of it in recent years through the process of fracking. isn't great environmentally, but it's less polluting than oil and coal. So if we use that as we transition to renewable energy, it will kind of ease the burden there. And then let's not forget that we've got to help people to be trained in order to work into renewable energy industries as well. And then fossil fuels are cheap right now. We continue to use them because of that. And again, it's artificially cheap. So if we gradually change that, shift that so that fossil fuels are a little bit more expensive and renewable energies are more subsidized, meaning the cost is lower for us consumers, we might see more industries take up renewable energy instead of fossil fuels. So the government strategies, we can really focus on where our money goes to keep the prices artificially low. So instead of keeping fossil fuel energy artificially low, there needs to be a movement to make renewable energy sources artificially low. So again, like energy prices are not necessarily reflective of the market because of government subsidies. Governments pay for fossil fuel industries now, but we're moving towards more renewables. That's the hope in the coming decades. If we keep prices artificially high for certain resources to discourage their use, that also would go a long way. And then just educating people about energy use, about energy efficiency, that can also go a long way, as well as just understanding the dynamics of it. Energy is not it is subject to the free market system, but with these government subsidies and these government influences, you have a very inequitable system, I should say. It's more focused on fossil fuels at the moment rather than on renewables, which is really where we need to go to be more sustainable. All right, taking a look at this line graph here, this is showing the history of different types of power in the United States, and the projections are from 2010 on. So there hasn't been a huge amount of change in those 10 years since this data was gathered, but take a look really at 2020 to 2035. What conclusions can you draw from looking at this graph? Pause the video while you answer the questions. All right, so there are three big ideas if you're going to take these away from this presentation. It's what do we do going forward with the energy resources that we use in America? We should look at energy resources based on the potential supplies that are available. So again, going back to that bar graph with how much energy these sources could produce. We should also look at their net energy yields, meaning how much workable energy, electricity, power do you get out of the resource that you put in. And then also consider the environmental and health impacts of using those resources. We're very well aware of the environmental concerns associated with fossil fuels, and also the health impacts for those who live in communities near power plants or where nuclear waste might go. So we need to consider all of those things when we're deciding what energy sources that we use. We also need to consider our distribution as well. I know that's not on here, but how do we distribute the energy? Our grid itself is extremely inefficient, and the ways in which we use it are inefficient. So improving upon that will also help us to improve our use of energy resources in the future. Here we are at our summary. This is showing a picture of an urban green roof. So you can see the sunlight is hitting that, and instead of going into those buildings, I'm assuming this is in a sunnier part, maybe the southwest of the world, or in another city that's very sunny, you would want those plants to absorb all that sunlight and keep the building cooler in this way. So you can see it's specifically designed in that stair-step way so that you can have a tier of different plants going up. So green roofs are a super cool technology, but again, it takes maintenance, it takes experts developing them. So it's a possible career that you could go into, since this is a technology that seems to be growing. Read through your notes again for today and write 10 complete sentences summarizing the main points. Energy efficiency is a hugely important topic, and there are lots of different things that you could say about it.